Oh my God, thank you for hanging in there. I wanted to thank Susan Peasy for asking me to do this, and Diana Glynn also. And there's somebody in the chat, her name is Susan Jockheim. She's a good friend of mine. She's a coordinator, the workshop director for Santa Clara Valley Watercolor Society. And so she's monitoring the chats, and that's how I knew there was a problem. So thank you, Susan. And tomorrow they're going to have a demo, so go to the Santa Clara Valley Watercolor Society website, and you can see a demo by Soon Warren. I'm excited. I can hardly wait. I think it starts at 1 or 1:30, but if you go there, you'll have a good idea of a link that you can watch the demo. So that's scvws.org, and they'll post the link there. My God. So with COVID-19, everything was shut down. We couldn't have classes or workshops because we had to be within social distancing. And as things reopen, we're still not going to be able to. And so we all had to do things differently. And a little Diana Glenberg told me that a lot of people are feeling lost right now. And especially with George Floyd and all the protesting that's going on, a lot of people are feeling a little lost. And so it's, what I like to do is, I had a discussion with a friend recently, Susan actually, and it was about responding versus reacting. So like me, just a few moments ago. So my first reaction is, when in panic or in doubt, run in circles, jump and shout. But that doesn't get you anywhere. So that was my first reaction. How I responded was conscious. So I checked the Wi-Fi settings. I ran to the my office where I have a PC, and everything was working. So I had to shut down my laptop, which I'm using right now, and restart it. And I was able to get into the same link, which is amazing. I didn't know you could do that. So anyway, going back to responding versus reacting. So if we're feeling lost, or we're feeling victimized, or just don't know what to do, you're just unsettled, who the heck isn't right now at this time? So it's like I always want to feel like, well, what can I do for myself to make me feel better? And for me, what I do is I paint. So even if I don't feel like it, I paint. And what happens is it gets me outside of myself, and I get to start feeling like a maker again, and being in that creative flow. And that helps so much. And then the more you do, the more you can do. So it's something that you can do to make yourself feel better, and you're stepping outside of being uncomfortable. And talking about stepping outside, I mean, here we are doing YouTube, and I don't know how many people are watching anymore, but what is wonderful about it is that I'm able to be myself, do what I do, and you're able to watch. The hard thing about it is I'm not feeling any energy. Usually when you're with a group, you're knowing right away if something is working, if something needs to be reset, or you can say what was the color, or what have you. So there's none of that back and forth. I'm not able to read the room, your energy, or anything like that. So it's just being very uncomfortable, but going ahead and doing it. So go ahead. It's a horrible time we're in, but there's also wonderful things. There's wonderful connections that are happening between people and races, and everything is unsettled, but it's a time, it's like for me when I'm painting, I'll look at an image and it may be chaotic, but I have to make sense out of that chaos. How am I going to go in and do it? So start being active in your life. Start respond to what's happening and what you want to express, and things will, you'll just have a better connection to yourself. Okay, so now back to painting. So I'm going to switch camera views here, and I'm going to go over So this is my photo reference. This is what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be painting this with just 4 colors, and oh my goodness, I'm all cattywampus now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start painting in the dark areas first. So right in here, oop, I forgot a pencil line and it's right there. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start in that center just so that I have myself found. And I'm using a low Cornell brush. Has a gorgeous, gorgeous point. I'm going to take this out. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to soften this out so I could get back into that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is this whole shape right here, I'm going to paint. This whole thing here. There's tons of pencil lines in here, but I want to paint the big part first. And what I want to do is, I don't know if you can see, but it's kind of soft right here. It's got a soft edge. This has a hard edge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this kind of wet out here. And by getting this wet, it's going to help the color move where I don't have to paint it so much. So I'm getting the shape wet, but I'm not getting it so wet, and I'm not going up to the perimeter edge of my shape either. And what I'm going to do is get some Winsor Violet. That's one of the colors we're going to be using. And what I'm going to do is fill the shape in. So see, the paper is wet, so everything is spreading, but I didn't go right up to the edge because I want that to be a nice hard edge. And what I'm going to do is move this around, paint my perimeter edge, and this is already starting to dry on me. And this is where I want it wetter so that this could all just spread and soften. So the water, I'm using water and gravity to push the pigment, and see how it pushed here? But it's not moving enough, it dried up on me. So what I'm going to do is just re-wet that with some pigment. Gonna let it run in, and I'm gonna put this here so you can see where I'm going. Oh my God, I'm so glad we're connected. I was just going and going like nothing at all, because of course everything was showing good strength, all of that, and but unfortunately, nothing, you weren't able to see anything. So right in here, I want this to be a little softer. So I get a damp, clean brush, and I move that along. So that's a good start. I'm letting it do whatever it's going to do. I'm going to have to come in, and there's other shapes that are inside of here, but I want to get the big shape done, and we could go back in later and do some smaller shapes. So now what I want to do is I have to go somewhere else. So what I'm going to do is go right here. And what I'm doing also is I'm doing an underpainting. So I'm going to get this damp. The other day, or a couple of days ago, it was so hot. And as soon as I put water down and then went to go put paint down, everything was already dry. And thank God that's not happening now. But so I got the shape damp, didn't go up to the edge, and I'm putting my color down. So you can see how damp it is here. It softens out, but it's dry here at this edge. So I can have control over my edge here. And it's deeper in here. Going to do the same thing. I have to calm down. Oh my God. And so what I was saying earlier was I finished this, I did this in a workshop that I completed a couple of weeks ago, and I painted this Once I put the underpainting in with purple, I'm going to put 2 other colors in here. But my students, a couple of my students, they went ahead and they used a different color completely, and I loved it. So that's what I am going to be working on doing. Okay, so I have to keep moving, and while this is wet, I can't paint that or this, and I can't paint that because this is still wet, or these. So I'm going to move to where I can paint, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into a shadow shape. And I'm just going to paint, since this is a shadow shape, I'm just going to go ahead, go in, and put it in. I'm not getting it wet, because I'm just going to be painting flat. So I'm just going to put it in, and I like to keep adding as I paint. And I just keep adding and moving. I am so filled with adrenaline right now, you just don't know. So I can see the line. I usually have great control, and right now I'm going, ay, 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 because I have to calm down. I want to Goldilocks this. I don't want this to be too much pigment or not enough pigment. So I'm just going ahead, trying to calm myself down. And I'm just going into a shadow shape. So the pencil lines are kind of heavy, but as I did the workshop, I lightened up my pencil lines and the camera wasn't able to focus. So I just did this shape right in here, okay? And I'm going to do a couple of little shapes while I can, and then just move on. So I'm giving this a chance to dry so we can start getting in here. This is my favorite part, is just going in, blocking some shapes in. I'm just gonna soften this edge right here with a damp, clean brush, and do the same thing right here. Okay, now where can I go? So these are still drying, too damp, so I'm going to go over here. And this I want kind of light, so I'm just dipping the brush in water and using the pigment that's already in the brush and just moving that along. Again, that was wet on dry. This is a background shape, a background petal. And let's see, I guess I'll go out here. This is a fun big shape. So what I'm going to do, because I want this to really move, I'm going to get this wet out here. Ooh, and I just spritz some water. And let's see. What I'll do is move it like this, so you can see. Okay. And oh, I just got my clean brush wet with purple. So I'm going to get this wet out here, this wet out here. I'm going to be working right in here. And so that's all wet on dry. Whenever a little splash happens, I just get my damp clean brush and pick it up instead of daubing it in. And I'm going to come out here. Let this run in where it's nice and wet. And I'm going to put a little bit and go over. I'm going to put some in here. Let this run around. So it's like I was saying, we're always going to have to respond to what's happening. And so I'm trying to make conscious thoughts and be here in the moment. And I don't have time for moments like these. But anyway, so I'm going to let this soften out. If I want more of color, deeper color in here, I'm just going to re-wet this. And I'm just going to let it alone. And what I'm going to do is put water here and let that water run back, and it re-wets the paper, and I'm letting it run along the perimeter edge there, and now I can let it come back in. And this is just an underpainting, so we're just getting everything locked in place. So I'm getting this damp out here, and I'll show you why in a moment. So I was talking about hard edges and soft edges, and if you notice this right here, it comes in, it obscures a little bit. So I want that to be really crisp right here, but these can kind of soften out. And now what I can do is I can start working inside here. So what I'm going to do is turn this rose around, and I'll show you where I'm going to work. I'm going to work right in here, okay, which is right there. And I'm calming down. Ay, ay, ay. So I'm going to get this damp, not wet, but damp, because it's such a small shape. If I get it too wet, I won't have any control. So I'm going to use my little brush, put some color down, so you can see how it pushes and softens where it is wet. And I kind of want most of the color to be right in here. So now I could come up to where I want my hard edge and fill that in. And this is all yummy and soft. I could get darker in here. And I'm just going to let this play out. And then while I'm here, I can fill this little shape in. So right now what I'm doing is I'm blocking in, making an underpainting. That's dry. I'm going to paint in here. So I have this petal to do. Let's do this big one here. Even though I was just here, I stayed away from that edge. So I can work this petal right here. So see how it's deep right in here, but right in here I want it to be white. So when I put red in, that's going to stay red. So what I'm going to do is, just like I did this one, I'm going to get it wet up in here, because I want, if the color moves in here, I want it to stay nice and soft. I'm getting this damp, not too wet, but damp. And I'm staying away from this pencil edge because I want the color to grab. And it'll grab great if I have dry paper. So I don't know if you can see a sheen or not, but if I put this down, you can see where my water edge is. See how far away I stayed away from that pencil line? Okay, I have to be careful. What I'm going to do, here's my hard edge, which is dry. And then as I put it into where it's wet, it just automatically softens out. And I'm going to come around. And where am I? So see where it was wet, I have a gorgeous soft edge. I want this purple to encroach in here, so what I'm going to do is get this a little bit more wet. Gonna let that water encroach into what I just painted. I just had a drop of water there. So it's re-wetting all of this, as you can see. And now I'm gonna let it encroach into here where it's nice and soft. I want a gorgeous soft edge in there. And I love the soft edge, but I want more color. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and put more color in and let that encroach. There we go. So I can see where the paper is not wet or damp. And what I'm going to do is, I like to let it encroach beyond my pencil line. So I'm letting it move in, and then I'll let it move back. I want it to go beyond where I want the light, so I'm happy with that. Just do a little bit of a cleanup there. Okay, so with that done, I could go into, nope, that was that. So I could go in here. And this doesn't have as much color right in here. See how dark it is in the corners and tucked? And this petal right here doesn't have as much. So I'm gonna get this damp, and I'm not gonna put as much color in here. So I'm gonna get that damp. Oh my God, I'm painting so fast that I'm not giving these guys enough time to dry. And I'm going to use the purple lightly. And I don't like, if I just did paint it around the shape, then it looks like I just painted a line, if you know what I mean. So I want that to be filled in just a wee bit more. I'll let that soften out. Okay, so I have a couple of more areas to go. So in the meantime, what I'm going to do is, there are some little shadow shapes, like right here, right here, right in here, right there, that I can paint while I'm giving these a chance to dry. So what I'm going to do, just like I did this and this, it was wet on dry, and I just filled in an area. So I want it to be pale because these are just shadow shapes. So what I'm going to do, which is right here and right in here. So what I'm going to do is just paint wet on dry, put that in, and this is a light area. I'm feeling better now. And just going to fill that in, going to fill that in here. And this one right here. And this is an underpainting, so I don't have to be too careful. I like to paint fast and quick and get everything down and done, but what happens is, because it's just an underpainting, I never feel like I have to be perfect. I'm thoughtful, but I don't feel like I have to be perfect. I love watercolor, and it's like you can fix things later. I would rather paint and get things down expressively without trying to be perfect. If we're trying to be perfect, things are going to start looking overworked. So I like the spontaneity of watercolor. So see, like in here, this is where my paper was dry here, but it was wet there. So when that color encroached, it stopped right there, and I don't know if you can see it, but if I take a damp, clean brush, and this is almost dry, but the pigment hasn't dried, so I'm not introducing water, I'm just getting a damp, clean brush, and I'm just wiggling it right on that hard edge there, and I'm able to get rid of it. So this, there we go. So I got rid of that hard edge without creating too much of a blossom. Okay, so what I'm working on is Arches 300-pound paper, and like I said, I love these low Cornell brushes. They're ultra round. The series is 70-20, and I use really just a number 6 and either a 12 or a 14. This happens to be a 14. I always have a brush that I just use with water, and that's this brush. And then I have one for blues and purples and darks. I have one for reds and one for yellows. So that way I don't have to stop and clean. So let's see, I just went here. I can go and do this one. No, let's do this one right here. So this, I'm almost done. So this petal is right here. We worked that one. There was hardly any darks in here. But this one right here and right here are pretty dark. So I'm going to work this one. And I guess I can put that down. And I'm going to get this damp because I want less color here. So if I want less color, because when I put the red down, I want it to really pop, I'm just putting a dark down. So you can see right in here, I'm going to have some dark right there. So I'm getting my brush. I didn't get it wet up to the edge here, so I'm putting that down now. And this I have to kind of go around. Putting it down where it's dry so it grabs. And this is supposed to be all damp so it softens out. There we go. And I have a gorgeous soft edge in there. And I want just a wee bit more right in here. So I used a little brush, and I can clean up this edge. I love using 300-pound paper because it has a longer play time on the surface than if I was using the 140 weight paper. And the 140 weight paper starts buckling as soon as it gets wet. This does too, it swells versus having mountains. And so I can control easier when I'm tilting because there's no mountains or valleys that I have to contend with. Okay, so I'm going to go in here now and do the same thing. Get this damp. Get some color. And I need to look at where I'm going right there. So if I go ahead, put that down in there, and I'm using almost the side of the brush, not just the point. And I'm going to let this encroach. Because I left the edge dry, it just sinks in immediately. So if I let it move out, let it come back, it softens out beautifully. And I'm happy with that. And it's so important to be happy. Okay, so I have this petal to do. I'm going to put a little bit of purple in here. just because it's so white. See how it's light over here? I want the same thing in here. So I'm just going to get this damp and wet. And I'm just going to add a touch, just so it's not so light. And I'm going to encourage that to soften out. Maybe have a little rose texture, a little rose petal texture in there. There, I like it. Now in here, I already did that. So I'm ready to go here, and then we can almost move on. Oh my God, I can't believe how quickly that went. So I'm going to get this wet out here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to encroach into this, even though it's not fully dry. I mean, this is a hard edge right here. And we do have a hard edge, but it's not as crisp as these edges. Do you see? So I want this to kind of disappear around this area. So what I'm going to do is paint this, and I'm getting this very wet, very wet. I'm going to get my purple. I'm going to put that down. And it's really purple in here. Love this color. Gonna let that build up. Don't you love the smell of wet paper? It smells like a wet dog in here. And so I'm removing some of that color here, just with a clean, damp brush. I'm letting this color encroach down here, and I want this to just keep moving. If I didn't, this would have a very hard edge, and it would be doubled up. We'd have a double density edge there, and I don't want that. So what I'm going to do is just encourage this to move down. And now I'm going to get my damp clean brush. Encourage that to move on down. And it's an underpainting. If there's some blossoms here and there, I'm going to use that. I'm happy with this. Okay, so I was getting really excited and has splashes of water here and there. And what I'm also going to do is I'm just going to take this. Oh, and that's a little too bright. Okay, so now that this is dry, I have almost everything in. There's just something else I want to do, and that is, it's hard to see in this photo, but there are petals in here, so I want to put that in now. And so what I'm going to do is, I can see my pencil lines in here, but you probably can't from your vantage point. And so what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to build this up. Remember, this is where we started, and I said I like to do some of those big shapes first. And it's nice and dark right in here. And this kind of encroaches that way. So what I'm going to do is soften that out and let those soften out. Okay, so my underpainting is done from this to this, okay? So in order for me to paint this, what I like to do now is, now that I've got an underpainting and it's kind of purples, what I'm going to do is, here is a dry one, and so I've already done this one prior, thank goodness. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this totally wet. We're going to do a flat wash over it, and I'm getting my handy dandy permanent rose out, and I want to make sure I have enough color to broadcast this whole thing. It's like, why does he do an underpainting? Because, and I'll answer you. What I like to do, and here's my red brush, my clean brush, my dark brush, and my little teeny tiny brush. And instead of just painting the petals one at a time, I like to paint the whole thing. And if I do an underpainting, all of that just works together. Also, I'm going to be painting bright rose and neutral tint. So if I needed to get something dark, it's so much harder to get my darks dark on white paper. So if I have something filled in for me already, it kind of helps, and I have to work less, I believe. That's my process. That's how I paint. Also, because I've done the underpainting, what happens is that I'm familiar with it, and I know where I'm going to have problems or areas that I need to be careful in. So it's like, it builds your confidence, and it builds your color, so it's easier to get darker. Okay, so I'm going to stick this over here. I am getting, and this is another brush that I love, and this is my 1.5 inch angled flat wash brush. Well, it's not a flat, yeah, well it is. It's flat, but it's angled. It's a 1.5 inch, and this is by Princeton Art and Brush Company, and it is series 4050. They have different series. Some of them are just really god-awful cheap brushes, but I love this one. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly get this wet, kinda-ish. I don't want to be painting too much because you'll see the purple is going to start moving on me, which is happening here. So I just want to kind of basically get it lightly wet. I'm not putting a lot of pressure on the paper. And now I'm just going to flood it with permanent rose. And by doing this, I've already got my pink rose in, and I have a lot of my darks in. So I've got the shape kind of all settled. So what I'm going to do now that this is all good and wet, is I'm going to let this move around. And I can see where it's not grabbing, so I'm going to get a mister here and just get it wet so I can encourage it to move. And it did wonderfully. So I want this to be moving all around, and you can see some of the purple is moving now, but that's okay. I've got a great underpainting. Letting it move and encroach. So you can see the purple mingling here with the permanent rose. Let it move out. Gonna let it move this way. So what I'm gonna do, it's kind of hard to see, but there's dry areas here. So I'm just gonna spritz and let this run right off. So I'm grabbing a tissue and I'm gonna wick up a lot of that excess. And I'm just gonna let that sit here for a little bit. Yeah, right. And now that this is all, wick up some of that excess, let that sit. What I'm going to do with a thirsty brush, there's areas that I wanted to reserve, like right in here and right in here. So I'm just taking a damp, clean brush and lifting off some of that excess. It's so wet that the color is going to encroach back in. But if I just keep at it, it'll help. Right in here, there's a little highlight in here that I want to protect, and I want this to be super clean, so I'm removing some of that excess. And then when this is dry, I can put some masking on to mask the edges. I'm not going to do that here for the demo though. Just a little bit at a time. There's only so much we can do. What happens is after a while, instead of removing pigment, you're going to start pushing it in. But this works fine. And you'll see once you're pushing it in that you know it's time to stop. But right now it's still coming off. This is kind of our center of the rose. So see how abrupt that is? But it's so wet that it's going to soften out just like it did in here. Okay? So I need to let this dry so I can put my masking on. From this to this, and it'll get to this, except instead of being red, I'm going to work with pink. So I'm going to talk a little bit about masking. This is the guide that I handed out, and these are the areas that I was going to mask right on here. So little bits of the center, some edges of these petals. So as I'm looking at this, we're going to be masking some of these edges out here. Okay, right in there. And this is the guide I gave everyone. And the masking I like to use it's called Incredible White by Graphics. I love this because it's very consistent, and right on the bottle it says stir, do not shake, and it's made in the USA. So I love this stuff. It's transparent, so when you first put it out it's opaque. It's like white, like Elmer's glue, but when it dries you can see through it. It's kind of got a little bit of a yellow color, but it's not going to throw me like some masks are. They're blue or they're black. Oh, I can't stand it. How can I judge my colors when I've got something that's supposed to be white and it's black? It just throws me off. And but anyway, I love this stuff. Okay, so I'm going to put this off to the side, and oh my goodness, it's only 12:13. I'm going so fast. I'll be right back. All right, so this one I already did the masking. Oh, and let me show you. So this one is wet, This one is dry. So as this dries, the color is going to fade a little bit. And you can see where I lifted off some of the whites and everything. And here you can still see it, but it's a lot softer. I put my masking on in these areas. And I'll show how I do that. So I have a couple of different tools that I like to use. This is a ruling pen. I love this. It's got 2 tines, and let me zoom in. So it has 2 tines like this and a screw. So if I unscrew it, the tines move apart. If I tighten it, the tines come together. And so like if I was going to be working on a kitten or a cat that has whiskers, and it was maybe it was a black cat with white whiskers. So before I painted the black cat, what I could do, and I always use a little container to put my masking in. And what I do is I just dip this in, and I'm able to do a nice line. Look at it, I'm not as shaky as I was. I'm doing much better. And then if I need it smaller, I could tighten it up a little bit and see if there's any masking that will come out. So that's a finer line. And now I have, so in between the 2 tines, that's the reservoir to keep that in. Okay, and I could make that bigger also. All right, and these are easy to clean off because it's metal, so the masking isn't going to want to stick to it. Well, it'll stick to it, but it comes off easily. And the other tool that I use a lot, and I use this mostly, is I just get a wooden dowel at the, hardware store, and you buy this in a length, I think it's like almost 3 feet, and I just cut it into 8-inch lengths and stick them in a pencil sharpener. So I can use that also. And because I'm doing it on color, you can see it. So I can get fine lines with this also. If I just move and I'm being really fluid and light. Okay? And to clean that off, I just get a Kleenex and just rub it right off. I use this tool a lot. Another tool, and I haven't cleaned this or used this in a while, this is a fine line applicator, and you just pour your masking fluid in. This is the old version, one of the original versions, and let's see if this is going to work. I think it may have dried up on me, so I'm going to have to clean this out. This is the old version, and I love this one. The thing that I hate is trying to stick this needle back in. Okay, but let me show you the newer version. So this is the newer version, but I know that this, look at how yucky this is. Let's see if this is going to work. Nope, that's clogged too, so I'll have to, oh, there we go. So this is wonderful. So I use this a lot, like for waves in water, and you can write your name with this, and look at how fine you can get. Very fine, but you can hear me scratching on the paper. I don't know if you can. But why I don't like this is it's hard to get it back in. So this is the newer version, which is safer to use, and this is the old version. So you could see the wire that was holding on to the grip here has come out. So I have to be careful taking it in and out. And I have another one of the old versions. Oh, maybe this one will work. And you can, I don't know if you can see, there's a hook that the needle hooks in. Well, it jutted out, and I had to bend it back. And so I think, oh, I feel like a surgeon. And I don't know if, oh, I don't have any masking in here, so I can't use that. So anyway, so I love the ruling pen right here. I use an applicator every now and then, but my favorite is the wooden dowel, and I just have a little container that I put it in. A shot glass is fine. It's not going to want to tip over. And then when I'm done, I just go ahead and pour this back. So this hasn't been sitting out in the open. This was sitting out in the open, and I can cover this. What happens with your masking fluid, as it starts, when I first get it, I'll show you. It's a nice cream color. Can you see that? When it starts turning tan, I just throw it away. What happens is this masking doesn't last forever, and if I'm working on a painting and I'm putting it down and it's tan, I have to be sure to remove that masking soon, or it's going to become a part of the paper, and that's a shame. So look at, all of my lines are already dried up, except for this one here. So I'm going to just paint over these, except where the masking is wet, so you can see how they appear. So there we go. So you can see the lines. And same thing right in here. These are dry. That's wet, so I'm not going to put my brush over wet masking. That would ruin my brush. Okay, does that make sense? So I masked this off already, and now we're ready to start painting. We started off with an underpainting. Oh, I'm going to back up. I'm going to get rid of this. And now we're going to start painting on here. So we started with this, we flooded it with pink, and then I put my masking in here. And now we're ready to start working our deep, deep colors. Ooh, I can hardly wait. Okay, let me get rid of those so they're out of the way. So I do teach a guided class. I'm going to give this a chance. So I teach a guided class, and it's Fridays, and that is, I teach a guided class, and we work on projects, and we just started one yesterday, actually, and we're doing Hummingbird, and you could find that on my website, GuyMagallanes.com, and I have guided classes listed there. I used to teach out at the senior center, but they're closed now for all of the classes. And I used to have classes here in my shop, but can't have people in here. So I do it online like this, and we haven't had a problem, except the very first one. But and so this is how we're doing it. And what's really lovely is that I can move faster because this is recorded. So the link that you went to view this live is the same link you'll use to watch the replay. So it's wonderful. So you don't have to feel like too rushed. And And so anyway, so I have that. Then I also have classes where people are working on their own images, and those are like independent classes. And we do that with Zoom, and everybody sends me their images in Dropbox, and then we can all get together and watch through Dropbox, and I can do Q&A and critiques that way. I'm going to show how to remove the masking once we're done painting. Right now I have the masking on here to protect these edges. I'm going to paint on it when I'm done painting, then I can remove the masking. Depending on how much time we have left, I put masking on that little sheet and we can take that off if the image isn't dry enough. Okay, so I'm going to get started here, and I'm going to move some of this stuff out of the way because I'm going to use a different palette. Oh my gosh, I'm excited. Okay, move this. I'm going to be using dishes now. So I've got dishes over here so I can put my color, because the palette I don't have enough room with the palette, and I need more paper towels. So I like to use Viva paper towels. I just always have. There we go. Get rid of some of the stuff that we don't need. Okay, so I'm using Bright Rose by Holbein. Oh God, I hope I have enough. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous color. And I'm also going to be using, let's move this aside, Neutral Tint, which is a gorgeous, gorgeous dark. It's not black. I don't like using black, but this looks black. The Mars black and the other black, the colors look dead next to it. And this has color in it. It's made with other colors. So it's kind of like blackbirds, when they're walking and the sun is hitting them. They change. Sometimes they look more on the purple side or the blue side or the green side. Well, that's what happens with this. So that's why I like using neutral tint. And I'll usually work a neutral tint with other colors also. So I'm using a squirrel brush now, and it's a mop brush. And because I want the colors I don't want to be moving the colors around. I want all of this to stay. Remember when I got this wet? When I got this wet and put the pink on, the purple was moving. Well, I want everything to kind of hang right where it's at. So I'm using, and I want this to be nice and creamy. So it's wet down here, but it's super creamy right here. Let me get a piece of paper so I can show you. Oh! So this is wet. Okay, see how thin that pigment is? And if I want to be working creamy, so I'm going to have this tilted. And if I'm going to be working creamy, there it is, creamy. There's a big difference. I don't know if you can see that. And this is Bright Rose. It's granular and it's super, super bright. And we have the purple underneath. So I'm going to let some of that purple shine through with all this beautiful pink. So here it is wet. So if I need it thin, I'll work with that. Oh, you can't even see. I'll work with that. Here it is thin, and then here it is creamy. See the difference? It hangs. Okay, so I have this tilted, and I have this tilted for me. Okay. Get rid of that. So I talked about this being my water brush and my dampening brush, and I just use this with water. This is a low Cornell brush, and I love the tip. But as I start getting things wet, and if I want to get them dark, what happens is this tip is rough, so it'll start leaving brush strokes. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put this brush aside, and this is now my water brush and my softening brush. And this is a sable brush by Isabi, and it's gorgeous, and it's nice and soft, so it's not going to be moving anything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start over here because I'm afraid. And I don't know if you can see where the masking is, but it's right here and right here. So a lot of my edges are protected. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just get this a little damp. I don't want it wet like I had done before, because what happens is the color starts diffusing too much, and I want to get this nice and deep. So I have my black ready, my neutral tint ready. Oh, I'm scared. And now I've got my bright rose. So what I'm going to do is turn it this way because I want to be painting into it. So I'm going to flip this guy around, and I'm just going to go ahead and start painting. So here is that petal. Oh, I have dust on there. So because I got it damp, I have a softer edge here. And I want this wet with the pink. I splatted, so I'm picking up with my damp clean brush, which happens to be the Isabi brush. And now I'm getting my neutral tint, and I'm going to put that right on in, and I want this to stay wet. And I have masking here at the edge. So, I have to be careful. More careful, I should say. If I screw up an edge, I'll just change it. That's how I roll. Okay, I want these to blend, and they're not blending because it's a little too dry. And I want to be sure that I've got my edge nice and... Okay, so do you see how I have a soft edge in here, but I want more? If I'm looking at this, I want the darks to encroach here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my bright rose. I'm going to let the bright rose encroach into the neutral tint, and it's dry right there. And I'm going to let that neutral tint and the rose mix. So it wasn't dark enough or wet enough. So now what I'm going to do is just put in a little bit more so that can move. There we go. It's now starting to move. I want it to encroach more, so I'm tilting my paper. I don't know if you can see where the gravity is taking hold here. So I'm going to let it run down. Now my black is going to want to run around that edge, so I'm just going to let it come back, let it move away. But do you see how it's moving in? So I want that to move. And I'm happy with that. So I'm gonna, oh, it's just so dramatic. Okay, so I am going to go into this area now, which is a smaller area. No, I'm not, because I don't have masking here. So if this was masked off all the way across, I could have gone there. I don't want to go here because that's still wet. I could go in, let's break this up. Okay, so in some instances, what I'm going to do is I'm going to work with a little brush. I'm not getting this wet with my Isabi brush. I'm just going to go ahead and get some of my pinks in here. And this is where masking was. And so I'm just going ahead and putting that down, right where the masking was. Getting it wet on dry. And wherever that masking was, I want that to kind of hang in there. Okay, now I'm going to get my squirrel brush. And it has a lovely point, but it's just different. And I'm putting that right up against the masking. God, I hope it's masked. And I'm going to go right in between the bright rose. Now I do have to get this damp because I want that to spread and soften. So I'm going to kind of have those disappear on me. Filling in what needs to be filled. And all of this is drying up on me. Did I say drawing? I meant to say drying. Okay. So now I'm going to put the bright rose in here. And I do have masking. I hope I have masking. Yes, I do. Whew. And so I want this a little wetter because I want that neutral tint to meld into it. Okay, so I'm going to get my neutral tint. Get that in here. So I don't know if you can see, but I'm still seeing the purple that's underneath and the pink, and it's just softening gorgeously. And I do have masking here, thank goodness. And I'm just carrying that all the way to the tip there. Ooh, be careful, mister. Okay, so I'm going to let that soften out. If it's not moving enough, I'm going to encroach by putting a little bit of pink in here, letting that run into the neutral tint. And it's causing like a blossom effect. I'm going to let that move back in. So see how it's encroaching? I see little threads moving. And I don't want to really paint. I just want this to encroach on its own. Like this, and I'll leave that alone. So that's done. And now I can go in here. I shouldn't, because that is still drying. There's masking here so I could do this one. So I'm going to be putting my bright rose in, and I'm looking at this petal right here. So I'm going to put my bright rose in. So it's almost like stained glass right now because I've got the wonderful masking there, and that's why I'm not getting this wet so much. Because it has nowhere to go. And I want this a little bit stronger, so I'm getting a creamier amount in here. And now I can get my neutral tint and put my neutral tint in. And let that encroach. I want a softer blend, so I'm going to drop some color in. I'm going to let it mingle with the neutral tint, and it's mingling right now, and I'm going to let that soften out. So let it come back. Let's let it roll out again. Let's let it move in. So I'm watching all of the pigment run down, and I'm going to let it come back. So I see threads and things, and it's moving beautifully. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab a little bit of neutral tint right here. And I can't tell if there's pigment there or not. I mean, masking. Okay. So this is drying, and I don't know if you can see the wonderful blend there and the gorgeous blend in here. Oh, I can see what I can do. I'm going to get this in here and fill this little bit. And then when I'm done here, we can take the masking off. I love taking the masking off because it's like Forrest Gumping it. You have an idea of what it's going to look like, but it's kind of shocking sometimes. But there's always something you can do, which is wonderful. Okay, so I have to go in here, I have to go here and there. So this is drier, so I can go in here. I'm turning it upside down. This is where I'm going. So I'm going to get that wet with the bright rose. And I've got masking up to this point, and then there's no masking right here. So I have to be right here. It's easy. Over here I have to kind of be real careful, like that. And I want this heavier, so I'm putting it down a little bit creamier. And this is where I want my darks to be. But I want this wet so that they can move. You see how they move and blend together. And I'm just moving, trying to keep a nice flow, nice pressure. evenly. Oh, did you see that little ball, that little explosion? I hate when those things happen. So that happens when you stop and lift up. So that pigment has to go somewhere. So see how I took care of it? And I want a little bit more in here. So I'm just barely touching the paper. And if I want that to blend a little better, I'm going to add some bright rose. I love the purple that's showing through here. So what I'm going to do is I'm adding more pigment and moisture. And I want that to encroach into the neutral tint. And it is. It's re-wetting. And now when I do this, it'll blend more. There we go. It's moving on me. Oh my God, this reminds me of my Auntie Gloria. She has a black leather jacket and it's got pink on it too. Okay. So I can move to other petals now easily. And so this one is basically almost pink. So I'm going to go ahead and do that one, because it's all saved within the masking. And I want that a little bit creamier. It's too wet. And what's going to happen is those gorgeous purples that we put underneath are going to, we're going to be able to see them. I'm trying not to paint too much. I want this to stay wet. So when I put the tiniest bit of, so I'm going to put, I don't know if you can see, but instead of grabbing for creamy, I'm just getting my brush wet with the puddle here, which is the thinner amount of neutral tint. And I want it to spread a little more. So what I'm going to do is get it wet and let it run this way. Let it come back. And let it come back out. It's a lazy way to brush, but it's actually more work, because you're not working with the brush, you're working with gravity, and you have to trust that it's going to do what you want. Okay, so I'm going to come over here now, and I have to remember there's no masking right there. And I just worked there, so I'm going right in here. So I'm getting it wet with the bright rose. I want that brush loaded, because I want this to stay wet so that when we put the neutral tint in, it will move. If it's not wet, I have to keep adding it and encouraging it to spread. So the wetter I am, and because there's a lot of masking here, it will stay in there, but I've got an area that isn't masked, which is right there. Oh, and it's wet. So I'm going to pretend there's masking there by leaving an edge. See how I did that so beautifully? And then there's no masking here either. Wow, what skill. Okay, let's get that wet. Oh, and that's the other thing. You have to be nice to yourself. So we're going through such a difficult time. You have to be nice to yourself. I was talking about responding and reacting. So if you're nice to yourself, it just makes life a little bit easier. Okay, so that's good and wet. This is where I'm going. So it's really deep here and there's some color there. Okay, so I'm going to start up here and I got it wet. I used the well and got that wet. Okay, and now I'm going to move down here. And I want this darker, so I'm first going to work this area. Let it re-wet, let it run where it's wet, and let's let it run this way. Oh, very good. So see how much better it runs when you get it good and wet? I want the dark to encroach beyond where I want it, and then I can let it move back. So now I'm having everything pull here, and now I'm going to let it run this way. So it's re-wetting this. So I didn't have to work the whole thing. You see how I managed that? And now I want this area in here to be creamier because this is a darker area. So I'm just going to go ahead and put that creaminess in between the masking. And let's let that spread and soften. Okay, so I have a little too much right here. Oh, this is a great example to show you. So do you see, as I do this, do you see how it pulled up the color? So that's why I'm trying to use the natural brushes when I am getting it wet or moving color around. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to drop in some bright rose because it's a gorgeous opaque color. And I want to wick up some of this excess. And I'm doing it on my masking there. Okay, cool. Wonderful. I'm kind of working out here so we could do the big stuff later. Let's do this one right here. So this one, it's dark here. So I'm going to get that wet with bright rose. It's a big area, so I want a loaded brush. And we have lots of masking here, so I'm going right up to the masking. That's why we did it, so we could get that wet with ease. We don't have to hold our breath so much. Even though that's separate, I'm just going to paint this in for right now. And there's masking there. Going to paint that whole petal in. We're going to remember, make sure that that softens and disappears. Okay, so I'm going to use the wet between creamy and wet. And I'm going to knock it in right in here. So if I put that in where I want it to soften, and then I can fill in right where my masking is. It helps it to stay wet. I want there to be more in the corner. So I'm putting some more, and that was pretty wet. And now I'm adding some wet bright rose. I want that to all mingle. And now it will blend and soften. So see how I'm getting it to work? Let those mingle. Let those... So for those of you that love to paint and paint and paint and paint, this is not for you. But if you paint and paint and paint, and you hate your brush strokes, this is something you should be trying. I'm happy with this. I'm going to have a blossom, I can tell, because it's already drying over here. So I'm going to drop some in. Let it move back. Let's let it move this way. So I'm the one in control here as much as I can. So I'm not jerking around. I'm responding to what's happening on the paper. So I am not being jerky with my movement. I'm letting it mingle and move out and softening and spreading. Just keep moving on, Mr. Guy. Okay, so look at how much more is done. So this is the fun part because they're so big, such big shapes. Why don't I do this one over here? Or no, I could go inside. Okay, so let's do these little tiny shapes first, and then we can start working bigger. Okay, so I'm going to fill this in with a little bit of bright rose. And the rest of that is all masked. I'm just going to pick up the teensiest amount, and that was too much, of neutral tint. Let's get that to blend. There we go. There we are. Okay, and there's another area. I want this filled in with bright rose if I didn't mask that off. And then we've got a little teeny tiny area here. And that's masked off too, I think. I can't tell. Okay, good, excellent. I am going to work a big, giant shape now. And I'm scared. So I'm going to get this whole petal in right now. I have to be careful of this edge because there's no masking. There is masking here. I can go into where it's going to be dark over here. So I'm not going to worry about that. See how I just increased? And because this is going to be dark in here. So I want to move all of this. And we're going to move in here. But I want this to stay wet. So that's why I went into the dark there. See how I'm working to make sure that some of these areas just stay good and wet. Because I have to move the dark in here. Okay, so with a creamy amount, okay, and then we have a hard edge right here. And it's not masked off. I love this. This is where you just have to be courageous and stick it right on in. And this is all a softer edge, and this is your hard edge. So now we're going to let that just hang there. I want to go in here, but I can't because that's all wet. If I put my pink in there, I would lose that. And see what we need, a nice hard edge right there. But this is all nice and soft, and we've got that soft edge there. So in the meantime, what I can do is work this way, and I can work the top up here. So what I'm going to do is get this all wet with my bright rose, and then we'll put a dark right in here. Okay? That's the plan. I need more pigment. I'm starting to do more YouTube stuff because we're doing YouTube live so much. And if you're in one of the classes, you get to keep that link, you know, for about 2 months. It's wonderful. So you don't have to feel like you have to get it done really quick. So that takes a lot of pressure off of you, a lot of the students. I didn't know if you noticed, but this was encroaching, so I'm just moving it, tilting it, and letting it run back in. Okay, so now I am going to get this big shape wet. So what was I talking about? Oh yeah, so I'm leaving an edge here. So with doing YouTube, I'm going to start having, and we could go right up into here. I hate that when somebody starts saying something and then they stop, and I do that all the time now. So what was my thought? It was, yeah, so I'm going to be having more guided lessons on YouTube that you can purchase. If you can't get into a class or you don't want to be in a class. The wonderful thing about being in a class is that we're all working together. And with the class, we're using Zoom along with YouTube Live. So on Zoom, you guys are able to send me what you've been working on, and everybody can see it. So and it's your chance to ask questions also, and it's dark right in here. So we have a shadow shape, and then we have a deep shadow shape, and this ended up being a little too light. And I could work this one now. I just have to remember where I am. And I'm doing so much more now electronically. And I used to have a blog, but then I stopped. And there was a lot of good information in there, but maybe I should be doing that again or have a newsletter. But I'm so busy with learning so much. That's something to do in the future. There's only one of me, for crying out loud. And I should be doing more, but right now that's about all I can handle. Maybe have a video blog. Maybe, what do they call it? Vlogs. Could do that. Okay, so this is all good and wet. I want my darks right up in here, and I'm getting it wet. I want that to travel. And I want more of that to be right in here. Nice rounded. There we go. More so we see the cup of the rose. Now it's going to travel in here. I'm happy with that. Now the big ash shape. Whoop! So I'm coming in here, getting this wet. We're just right here. It's still wet. I want that to travel in. Getting it wet, keeping it wet, and I keep adding because I want this evenly wet. A little dry spot there. And I want this creamier, super creamy, because I want this to hang. So do you see how it's hanging? It's because this is super creamy. Right here it's hanging. So we're still seeing the cup of the rose, and it's kind of disappearing right in here, which I wanted, which I love. And now down here, we can have this a little wetter because I want that to spread. The creamy is not going to spread, it's just going to hang right there. And I want this, so I'm getting a wet amount because I want it wet in here. I want this to spread. I wanted that to hang. Differences. Oh my gosh, I'm not watching my materials, which is bad. We want to be Boy Scouting this all the time. We want to be able to make sure we have enough of our material ready for us. So I want this to push back into that neutral tint. See, look at how I have to moosh and work, and it distracts me from what's happening on the paper, which is not a good thing. So now you see why you should always be Boy Scouting it. Okay, so I'm going to let this move. Let's let that move this way. Let's let it move in. There's hardly anywhere where I can touch. I'm going to let that move in because I'm not liking that right there. So if I let this encroach in and see, it's moving right there, so now I'll let it move back out, and I'm going to try and make this disappear a little bit. I like it, but I just don't like it too much. So I want it to be a little bit less. And by me responding to it and letting it move, it's adding more nuance. And God, I love nuance. And so if we let it do its thing, it's adding a little bit more drama. And we didn't have to do anything except let it do its thing. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come on this side, and then we'll add some darks in here. Okay. So do I have enough bright rose? Okay. So I'm almost done with this. We're getting there, and I'll be able to talk more once I'm not painting so much and explain some things. And so what I want to do right now, I don't have any corners that I can easily grab, so I'm going to be careful. So I'm putting my bright rose down, and it looks like I'm using a lot of pressure, but I'm not. I have my brush at an angle, but I'm not rubbing it into the paper. I'm just going to go ahead and cover that. Why be so careful over there? But I have to be careful against this dark edge. I'm going to go right up into here. This is masked off. That'll be lighter. Going to get this all good and wet. Oh, look at how, there we go. There we are. Just keep going. There's no masking here. See how I wiped off because I encroached into the neutral tint. So I'm going to do a couple of things here. I'm going to get it dark, add some darks, and then we're going to do the same thing that we did over here. Right? Right. Okay, so I'm going to get this wet. What I mean is I'm pulling in the well instead of getting a creamy amount. And I'm going to pull up right in here next to the masking. And as I get closer in here, I am going to get creamy. I want it to hang right there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to encroach in that. Okay, so I want this to, see how that wrapped around beautifully? I would have to do the same thing right here. And I want this area a little darker. And I want this to travel that way also. I'm happy with that. Let's let that encroach. Let's let that soften. Happy with that. I want this to soften. So I'm getting it wet. And I'm going, and there's masking right here. Oh, maybe there's not. Yeah, there's masking there. So I'm getting that up to the masking, so it's helping to keep that wet. And what I'm going to do you see how all my neutral tint is right here? So what I'm going to do is get this all wet. I'm going to go right into where I just put that masking, I'm at neutral tint, and I'm going to bridge this. So these can move freely now. I have to be careful. I want it to disappear, but I still want it to be there. If that makes any sense at all, I know it does to me. So let's let that pink move out into the neutral tint. Do you see how powerful that pink is? It's really pushing. And now we're going to let it run back in. And we're going to have a gorgeous, gorgeous soft edge there. It's going to be ghosty. And I'm letting it move out. Okay, so now I have another area that we want to encroach into, and I'm mixing and mooshing that brush around because I don't want, this is fresh paint, so I don't want any globs of paint. So I'm going to get this wet out here with that creamy mixture. And let's get out here. because we want this to be a soft edge. So now I'm tilting it. I'm going into that edge and I'm just moving. And do you see how it's just wanting to go on a wonderful, adventure? Just like we do. We want to have a nice adventure. Yeah, I'm going to let it run this way. I have to be careful. See how that petal is disappearing, but it's still there at the same time? I love it. Okay, so while we're here, I'm going to do the same thing down in here. So that'll be a softer edge because it's wet on wet. And I'm going to do the same thing right here. But I want this super wet. This is still wet, but it's drying. So I'm going to go right up to the edge here. Give it a little swirl like that. And in the corner I want it darker. Well, no, this is fine. This is gorgeous, actually. Just going to leave it alone. Okay, so I'm done. I'm liking it. I think I want a little bit more pink in here and a little bit more pink in there, but I have to wait for this to be totally dry. I like my edge in here. I love the colors. I really loved this. It was so deep. And this is the pink, but we're not done yet. So I have to let this dry before I can take the masking off. So I know if you guys have any questions, let's see, what am I seeing here on the feed? What did Susan ask me? Do you have a newsletter or a place for people to subscribe or be able to give you their email? Yes. Send me an email. I guess and on YouTube, you can subscribe to my channel. Like I said, I'm going to be doing more things on YouTube. And I have tons of video there, except that it's for students that have paid for lessons. And like I said, I want to kind of change some of those lessons so that anybody, because it's an older lesson, you can still follow along in that. So I'm going to be incorporating that so you can go ahead and do that. Right now on my web page, my website on guided classes, you can pay with PayPal. So I have a student that's in New Mexico. I have a student that's in Ohio, and so they can either send me a check or they can pay by Venmo, but there's people that I don't know and they've been paying with PayPal. So what happens is once you pay for a lesson, I send you a link to Dropbox, and within Dropbox you get a folder. In that folder you get a photo reference, you get a line drawing that you can print out. I print out on 11 by 17 paper, which is perfect for working on a quarter sheet of paper. If you can't print 11 by 17 paper, what I do is I break it up so you have a top half and a bottom half, and you just tape it together and you have a complete line drawing. A right or a left, top or a bottom, however you want to call it. And then you've got a line drawing so you can follow along. I also have a folder in there for shared. So if you're in my class, you're emailing me your picture as you're painting, and I will have a shared folder. And then when we have a Zoom Q&A, I'm able to, you have a chance to ask your questions, and I have a chance to give a little critique. And it works out pretty well. And it's fun, and everybody gets a chance to be heard. And I think it's really important to be heard. I'm loving this, it's so cool. I can see where it was pale because it was too wet, but I can see where it's nice and bright, but I still have to wait for this to be dry before I can take the masking off. So yeah, I will, I don't have a forum page on my website, but I just learned how to put PayPal on, for crying out loud. I just learned how to put videos out there for crying out loud. So I will be doing a form, so you can do that on the website. But please go ahead and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and because I'm going to be doing more. I'm also going to be giving out free little things on YouTube. So I just finished, oh, I'll be right back. I just finished showing how to mount watercolor onto a wooden birch panel. So that was a half-hour video, and right now it's just for the people that took the Santa Clara Valley Watercolor Society workshop. So that was a bonus for them. And in a month, I'll just put that out, you know, so you can see it. So there'll be some tons of nice little tidbits of information. Or like with this masking, you know, after a while I'll start pouring it out and globs will come out, you know, it's like curds and whey or whatever. Oh, it's disgusting. So what I do is I have tricks on how I thin that out and get rid of the gloppiness. So I can do little things like that, little tidbits that are free. But this is 11 by 17 paper, and it's the perfect size for this. So, you know, if you fold 2 inches or 1.5 inches, it's a perfect fit for this. Okay? Oh, you can't see. And like I said, I have it printed in there, so if you can print 11 by 17, that's great. If you can't, I'll have a right side and a left side that you can print out on regular paper. And if there is masking, I give you little guides of where it's going to be masked. And I'm still waiting for this to dry a little bit more before I can hit this with a hair dryer. And when I hit it with it, so it's still a little damp right here. So I can't use a hair dryer because it'll move the pigment. So I'm just going to keep talking for a little bit. So let me show you what we're doing in our Friday class. It started yesterday. And I put this aside. So this is what we did yesterday. We're painting this Costa's hummingbird. This was the photo reference I took. I was in Palm Springs and I was hanging out by the pool in a corner because I kept seeing hummingbirds. So they kept flitting back and forth, and then because I stayed there reading a book, they were used to me. So they started hanging out and I was able to get this picture. They are so tiny. They're only about that big. Super tiny, not as big as the Annas that we have up here. So, but they have a beard. And when he moves a certain way, it glows purple. And so I love this image, and I've painted it before, but what we did was we masked off this whole entire hummingbird and the twig that he's on. And we worked wet and wet, and we did 2 or 3 applications working wet and wet to have this gorgeous soft background. And we already started putting him in. You know, if I was teaching this live in person, we would have only been able to do the background. We would not have been able to even get to the bird. So this is one thing that I love about doing the YouTube live. So I'm able to move on, because what will happen is, what color did you use? Wait, you're moving too fast. So because this is recorded, it lets people be freer just to watch. A lot of people will still paint along because I'm getting pictures to send to Dropbox for this class immediately once the class is done. So I've got some really fast people, but I have a lot of beginners too. So, but anyway, I'm going to show you, I've done this one before. And I put this on a birch panel also. And so this is a smaller version, this is a larger version. So I don't know if you can see the size difference. This is about 140% bigger. And I like the light background. And he's going to be so punchy and dark And do you see how faint he is here? But when I look at the photo, it's much darker and deeper in here. So I'm working to get this guy punchier than this guy. And this background is really punchy. I wanted it lighter. So that's what we're doing. We did all of this in one day. Of course, I gave them homework. So they had to draw this. They had to mask off the little hummingbird. And what we did before we put the masking on is we sprayed it with a fixative, because we use this incredible white mask to go over everything. If we didn't spray a fixative, when we went to remove the masking after we painted our gorgeous background, it would have taken off all of the pencil lines. So it helped to hold those pencil lines so we can see what the heck we're doing. So I love the guided classes, and I love that they're live because we can move faster. So these are the 3 images that we did. This is almost dry. I can hit this with the dryer. These are the 3 images we did for the Santa Clara Valley Watercolor Society. So we did this, and they're almost all primary colors. I just noticed recently when I finished, you know. So this is a yellow rose with a honeybee. This is the deep red rose, yellow and red. And then we also did this wonderful succulent. And so it's more on the shades of blue. They worked so hard to get all 3 of these done in 4 days. It was amazing. I had a ball. I was exhausted, and I know they were exhausted. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna mute this, and I'm gonna dry this. So bear with me, and we'll take the masking off and I'll show how to do some finishing. All right, I'm back. The fixative I used was Winsor & Newton fixative, but you could even use hairspray. So it's a fixative, and it doesn't affect the paper like you would think. So yeah, but I did use Winsor & Newton fixative. I usually really wait for this to be totally dry, because I've had students where they went to take the masking off and the paper wasn't completely dry. As they took the masking off, it kind of ripped a tissue edge of the paper off along with it. But I'm gonna chance this and just take this masking off. Oh, and I'm gonna get rid of this damp towel. I said damp. And oh, and put my glasses on. I'm no good without those. So ouch. I love taking the masking off. It's one of my favorite things. I did yesterday when I took the masking off the hummingbird. I got it all off in one go. It came off, and it's like I enjoy little tricks like that. I'm just so amusing. I can amuse myself. So it's like trying to peel an orange or try and get it all off in one. Little things like that. Really, I'm such a nut. Really make my day if I'm able to peel an orange and it comes off in one peel. Okay, I'm feeling around. I don't know if you noticed, but I was using the hair dryer and the paper starts curling this way. Oh, I'm kind of pink. So I turn it the other way and I hit it on the back side, and it kind of helps to flatten it out. But I'm always manipulating and maneuvering this paper and trying to reform it. So I'm doing things like this to get it flat, okay? So now that the masking is removed, and there's some things that I want to touch up also. So first let's do a little bit of touch up. There's some areas in here where we had some shadows. And now, I'm going to move this. I'm going to get this out of the way. And I need more moisture on this. So we had some shadows in here. So I'm just going to add a wee bit to that. Here's a shadow shape right there. There's another shadow shape right in here. Oh my gosh, I've got black all over me. Another shadow shape right in here. Another one right here. So if I just get that a wee bit darker, that helps. And I want some more color right in here. Let me clean this off. Okay, so now what I want to do, some of these masking edges are just too much. So I can scrub those and soften them. But the first thing that I would try to do was I would get a little bit of color. And for instance, like right in here, I'll just take a little bit of the color and put it in so it's not as obtrusive. The masking was on here, so the paper is a little bit roughed up. So it's not as smooth. But this helps. Sometimes just this will do it. And we don't have to paint the whole thing. We want to see that there's a little flow and a curve. But maybe on the other side we can just touch it up. And I'm not trying to paint this flat either. So it's heavier here. Maybe it'll be heavier here and heavier here. And that's what I meant by flat. So there's movement. There's rhythm. There's a flow. And just by hitting little bits here and there, the obtrusiveness of that just kind of disappears. And these kind of join. And it's not as blatant. I was talking earlier about nuance. Remember when we were down in here when it was wet? Look at how it dried. And I don't know if you guys can see, but the grain and everything, oh, I just love it. Some people don't like grain. I love it. I enjoy the texture. As I'm getting closer to the center, see it's brighter out here, so I wanted this to be brighter. In some areas, I want to be darker. Oh, I just painted somewhere and I just stuck my hand in it, which is not a good thing. So all I'm doing is just filling in little bits and taking a look as I go along, painting wet on dry. And this was pretty fast. You poor people, and poor me, starting the demo and I thought everything was going just great. It showed that when I looked at YouTube before I went to my streaming service, it said the strength was excellent, the streaming strength, and the connection was excellent. So when I got that text saying we can't hear you and all we see is a spinning circle, I went, what? So thank you all for hanging in there. Oh, I think there's a little bit of masking right there. Where'd my... So I'm going to hit this. There we go. Maybe alter that. Oh, that's too heavy. So anyway, all worked out well at the end. I just have to thank Susan. I think she's left. She had another appointment today, so she was with me for a little bit. So, and then right in here, let's change that. So do you see how just it's like you can finish these, and I did paint awfully fast today, but I like painting quickly. There's always something you could do to clean things up, and I would rather spend my time that than just trying to be perfect all the way through. I have a more fun painting, and I trust that with when I'm using my process that I know how to clean things up or adjust things. And I want to have a fun experience while I'm painting than being so tight all the time. I really, it's one of the things that I try to get my students, number one, to see things, and to see things a little differently, and to challenge them. And I think to see things is really incredible. I know that it's like we paint an oak tree, or we have painted oak trees, and they would say, "Oh, I'm looking at oak trees and they're all different to me," and that gives me the biggest kick. That makes me feel like I'm making a difference. I just see things differently. It's like I was telling you, I'll look at an image and I have to figure out how to make, to simplify it, what to keep in, what to keep out, and I love working with the chaos. And how do you make sense out of that chaos? And that to me is the fun of it, engineering it. And I'm just gonna lightly come in here, and I hope you can see the difference that just this did. Now this is such an opaque color. Can you see I'm just wiggling? And there was a harsh line here. Let me zoom in. Woo, that's way zoomed in. So do you see this harsh line here? So I can get rid of that harsh line because this is such an opaque color just by getting a damp brush and wiggling it right here. And it's softer. It's like I was saying, it's a little more nuanced. So same thing like right here. Just get that damp. I like the line, but I just want it less. So it's less cut out. Now see how I'm just wiggling the brush, a damp brush, and I don't want to get rid of the dark, so I'm just going to soften that. Okay, talking about the dark, so now if I need to clean up a dark, what I'm going to do is use kind of a dry brush and just come in a wee bit. Now I can take this on this side, go like that. So I love cleaning up on the tail end. It puts me in a Zen mode. Now see how that got cleaned up? And I'm not sure I needed this little wiggle thing here, but it's there. I'll take a look at it later, but I'm just going to adjust it. So those are the things that I do to adjust. And I'm always on the side that I want to soften. So there was that harsh edge, I was here. Sometimes if I needed to get rid of it, I would have been on this side. I don't know if that makes sense. It does to me. I want to get rid of this harsh edge. I'll explain it. I'll show you what I mean. So I want to get rid of this harsh edge. So what I'm going to do is if I'm working up to it, I'll get it damp. And now when I wiggle into it, disappearing. So just little tiny things like that get rid of the harshness. Now I'll pull what's there right into it. So it's not such a harsh line that was there. I minimize that. Do you see, like right here also? I'm zoomed in, so I have to be careful so that you're able to see what I'm doing, for crying out loud. There we go. So I'm just wiggling and adding a little nuance so it's not as rough. So Susan was saying if you wanted to contact me, just go to my website. It's got my contact page. I will make sure there's a form there. I'll work on that. But you can always email me, and it's just me, guy@guymagallanes.com. And I know Diana does classes also, but I don't know if she's having classes in person or not with all that we're doing. But I really hope that you're all painting, taking the time to do something, because when you're uncertain or not feeling well, this really helps you to get out of that funky mood where you're just, it makes a difference for me. Okay, so I'm just dabbing with a tissue, and I want to do the same thing here on this side. So I'm getting it damp, wiggling to get rid of the harsh line. Or the other thing I could do is just get this, let's just get a pink in here and butt it up to the dark, and then we can clean up that dark. Oh, and let me show you right in here. So let me back off a little bit because I can't tell if you're getting it or not. Okay, so I'm going to get this kind of creamy. I want these to disappear. I don't want lightning or it looks like lightning or chicken feet, for crying out loud, and I don't want that. But I wanted to be able to see them. So if we do that, we can see them. I'm going to get my dark. And I'm going to go ahead. And there's no masking in here now, so I have to be real careful. But this is cleanup. These are finishing techniques. So now I'm going to get a little closer because I want these subdued. And now they're disappearing. There we go. I don't want to get in too close in here. There's going to be a line of demarcation where I left off. And I don't want to have to go all the way up into that. Oh, and did you see what I just did? So I'm going to leave that alone now, if I can. And I'll nudge that a little later, but that looks a lot better than it did. Maybe I'll do that a little bit more. And sometimes it's like you should leave well enough alone Okay, so I would just go in, clean up the corners, tone down the edges, but I'm really happy with this. And and it was two of my students did it pink, and I loved it. And this is how I taught. So anyway, I love the deep red, but I'm really liking this. I wish I had gotten my darks a little bit deeper, but yeah. So this is using Winsor Red, which is a very opaque color, with the neutral tint. And with the same same start with this, starting with the purple. See how it's folding, you know, it's curving. So both of these had the same start. Both of these had the same start. So it started off with the underpainting, going over with permanent rose, because it's so much easier getting dark when something already has pigment on it than trying to get dark on white paper. And by doing all this, you know your rose already. So as you start putting things in, oh, so you can see where I fixed up with the masking. So I added some color, I softened some edges, some areas are deeper, some areas are lighter. I mean, you could go for days and days and days. But I'm happy with the result, so showing you two different approaches, or the same approach but using two different colors. And it was working with, like I said, oh there, I was looking for this. So there you go. So feel free to send me emails. It's guy@GuyMagellanes.com. Feel free to subscribe. And those of you that subscribe, you can always ask me questions on the YouTube channel also. And I hope you start painting more, getting in touch with your creative side, because that always makes me feel I get to step outside of myself and my little world, and I get to jump into a world that's you know, just being creative. You're stepping outside of yourself and letting everything come to you. So it's like you can listen to your intuition, or to your heart, or to your soul, or whatever you want to call it, as you're stepping into your creativity, and you're doing something productive, and you're challenging yourself and expressing yourself. And the more that you do that, the more that you can do. So please, I hope you go ahead and start painting if you haven't been. And that's about it. So I want to thank Susan Peasy again for asking me to do this rose. Oh, let me show you something. So I did this same demo for SWA, the Society of Western Artists, and I worked on a bigger image, but this is as far as so I started off showing what to do, and then I went to a board that was already finished, showed them how to get it wet with pink, and then this one, I showed them how to put the masking on, and then started working with getting the Winsor Red and the neutral tint on. But this is as far as I was able to get. You know why? Because it was live and it was in person, and people are always asking questions, or you have to have a break, and so was able to get this done all at one go from start to beginning. I just think that's incredible. So that's another reason why I like doing the live. The only thing I don't like is that I don't get to see you guys in person, and you don't get to ask me questions in person. So we're having to be in a little bit more of a virtual reality. But with being within that virtual reality, let's connect. Let's connect and share ideas and experiences, okay? So anyway, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and that's it. So again, thank you, Susan Peasy and Diana, for helping me and asking me to work on this. And then also I want to give a big thanks to Susan Jockheim, who was able to text me and guide me a little bit on what you guys were asking during the chat. So be well, be safe, and be loved. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye. Oh, and this will replay, so keep the link.